Hey, if you clicked on this video because you're a veteran and you're thinking about buying a house in St. Louis, I've got some really interesting facts I want to share about the VA home loan, the biggest misconception, the thing I didn't know that I could do, and then when I did it, I was not only super excited about it, but I was kind of surprised. This video is going to be a part of a playlist. This will probably be the first video of the entire playlist because I want to talk about the misconceptions, the big one I didn't know that's going to be really helpful, and then also breaking down the process in different videos specific for the borrower, the property, lenders that you want to use, and the type of agent that you want to look for. For me personally, I am a veteran. I'm an OIF, OEF veteran. I learned about the VA home loan in my separation class before I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan, which, typical government fashion doesn't make any sense. And no, I didn't pay attention. I didn't care. I was more concerned about deploying to Afghanistan and what my future was going to look like, if any. So, fast forward from there, I used my VA loan, and there was a big thing that I wish I would have known, and it's a complete misconception. So I'm going to go through all the big ones and then talk about the one I think is probably the most beneficial for us veterans. So a couple misconceptions with the VA home loan. First of all, the VA doesn't issue any sort of loan. They only guarantee it. They guarantee 25% of it. They don't go and inspect the property. They have almost no part besides giving you your certificate of eligibility that you get off the website, and you don't even need to talk to anybody to do that. You could do it right on the website. So other than that, the VA has no real hand in the process. A lot of people, a lot of veterans that are buying think that they're going to send out an inspector for the property. They don't do that. You need to hire your own inspector. So you've got two layers there. First, you have to inspect the property, just like any buyer with any sort of loan, or if you're paying cash, that's the route you want to go. First, you want to get it inspected. And then the VA is going to come and do their appraisal. A lot of people think that it's an inspection, mostly because people hear about all these different things that fail on a VA appraisal. The interesting thing is that because it's backed by the government, just like FHA and USDA, they have very similar guidelines. And so that's the misconception, is that the VA has a super special set of guidelines that makes it harder to buy a house because the VA goes in there and they inspect it and tear the house apart. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that they're making sure the property meets the conforming guidelines for a VA loan, just like an appraiser will do for an FHA loan or a USDA loan. There's conforming guidelines for the property, and I'm going to talk about that in a different video because I just want to tackle the misconceptions. The next misconception that I remember from class, a sergeant probably never used his benefits, probably didn't know what he was talking about. He told us that you only get one time to use it, and you want to make sure you use it the right way. Well, that's a big misconception among the veteran community. I think a lot of that's getting cleaned up now, at least for us OIF, OEF veterans. I think there's a better understanding of it. But the older veterans that I talked to, that was kind of what was preached. That's just not true. You can use your benefits as many times as you want to, up to the eligibility amount. And that's not even the biggest misconception about it. So not only can you use it multiple times, but the biggest misconception is that you can have two VA loans at once, meaning you can have a VA loan on a house that you're going to sell, buy another house, hold that VA loan, and then sell that property, and then that portion of your eligibility gets restored. Or you can do what I did. We bought our first house on that FHA 203K loan, which meant that we financed the purchase and the renovation in one loan. And then we refinanced into a VA loan, which reduced the rate and required no down payment. And then we had to pay our funding fee. But what it allowed us to do was to be able to keep that 5% loan, because a 5% loan in 2018 with no PMI on it was a big deal, because you pay that insurance amount. You pay it up front. That's the funding fee. So then we were able to go buy another house with my same set of benefits. And I'm not even sure if we maxed out my eligibility. But once you max out your eligibility, that's where you run into issues where you need to either refinance out of that VA loan or sell that property. But in our case, we financed the first house with a VA loan through the refinance. And then because we were a growing family, we needed to move and expand and go to a different school district. Those were the reasons that I put in the letter to the underwriter and they approved it. And you don't have to go 100 miles away from that property like a second loan. You can be 10 miles away like I was from that house. A couple quick misconceptions. You have to be 100% disabled in order to have the VA home loan. That's not true either. Now, if you want the funding fee waived, then that disability plays a factor. And I believe it's on a threshold basis, depending on how much disability you claim is how much that funding fee is waived. I'd have to look into that, but that funding fee is tied to disability. This isn't a big misconception, but I think one of the reasons veterans don't use their benefits as much or as frequently versus the other options that require down payment, because really your conventional or FHA, really that's the next route to go with 3 or 5% down. The problem is that sellers, their agents, and lenders do not understand the VA loan well enough to articulate that to the client on the other side. For example, if I'm working with a VA buyer and we're going to go write an offer and we're going to compete with another offer, the couple things that I'm doing, I'm going through that house. I know what the guidelines are. So I'm going through the house to make sure that it's going to meet the guidelines, or there might be red flags. Like a house that I just looked at today. There's some cracks in the foundation, likely not structural, more so related to water intrusion. And I have to make sure, hey, are you going to fix that if that comes up in the VA appraisal? Because it might. I've had some goofy stuff show up, like cleaning leaves out of the gutters. I had that as a condition on the appraisal. And I'll talk about that in another video, the whole entire process, so you know what a condition means. But that is a big issue in our market, that people are afraid to accept offers from VA borrowers. There's nothing to be afraid of. The VA loan process is nearly identical to FHA, and the same process in terms of valuing a property, because there's a lot of claims that, oh, VA appraisals come in low. No, they don't. They don't come in low at all. They come in at market. You have to be able to show that through the comparable sales in the area. And that's the same way with a conventional loan. That's the same way with an FHA or a USDA loan. That market analysis, when appraisers are comping properties, that doesn't change just because it's a VA loan and now I'm going to comp the property a different way. That's not how you come up with a market analysis. The market analysis can't change based on the financing type, whether that's FHA, VA, USDA, conventional, or cash. If you're a VA borrower and you want to use your benefits, that's where you need to do your research and ask around. Talk to agents. How much do you know? Do you know what to look for in a property to make sure that this house would meet the VA guidelines? That way we don't run into any issues with the appraiser. Or if you see an issue that may come up, peeling paint, a handrail's missing, those kind of things get called out. What's your process to be able to tackle that with the listing agent in the event I want to write an offer? Because you're going to have a lot of money out of pocket. You're going to have the inspection and the appraisal money out of pocket. So it's really important to get an idea of where is the seller, and is your agent able to articulate that to the seller to explain, hey, this is a VA appraisal. Here are a few issues that might come up. Are you willing to fix those items because the borrower cannot do it? So here's my approach when I'm working with a VA buyer. What I do is, before we go and look at properties, I make sure I run comps, make sure that the list price is within reason. That doesn't mean my client's going to offer the list price, but I want to make sure at least the seller's expectation, because that's basically what a list price is. The seller's expectation are in line with the property being able to appraise for that amount. The thing is that if I can't find comps when I'm comping a property and just go back a little bit, a comp is a comparable sale, an apples to apples, and that's not a ranch to a two-story, but it's a ranch to a ranch with the same beds, baths, square footage. So if I can't find that for a VA loan, I can't find that for a conventional loan. You can't make up these comps per loan. That's why when people say, oh, it didn't appraise for a VA loan, it wouldn't have appraised for a conventional loan either. It's the same process. Then when we get to the house, I'm walking through the house and I'm trying to identify any red flags that might come up in the VA appraisal, because that's what an appraiser is going to look for to make sure that it's a conforming property for the VA loan type. And they're going to do the same thing if it was an FHA loan, because they're government insured, government backed. They're going to have the same requirements, especially when it comes to peeling paint, safety issues, foundation issues, leaks, those kind of things that they're looking for in FHA, they're looking for in VA. They want to make sure that the property is conforming and that it's safe for the borrower. The idea behind the VA loan is not only is it a benefit, but the VA is trying to be an advocate for the borrower to make sure they're not buying a junker. So it's meant to be an added layer of protection, but the VA appraisal misses so much more than it actually finds. As I mentioned earlier, what I tell my buyers, I say, hey, look, I think this issue might be a problem. I think that issue might be a problem. Oh, do you see the peeling paint on the gutter up there or on the fascia board? That is going to come up in a VA appraisal. That appraiser is going to hit that every time and mark that as a condition to the loan, and you're not going to be able to get funding until that's corrected, and it can't be corrected by the borrower. Once we have that conversation that, yes, I'm interested, I think I want to write an offer, that's when I call the agent and say, hey, look, I have a VA borrower. It looks like a really clean property. There's one issue, though. There's peeling paint near the roof. Would your seller be open to fixing that? Assuming that we get through the inspections and there's no other real major red flags. That's kind of the loose process that I go through. I'm going to go ahead and make another video where I break it down, and I'll even give you a little bit of a cheat sheet so you know what to look for. It'll be very similar to what the VA guidelines are, but the most common things that I've seen come up in some of the eyeballs too. That way you're prepared. So if you like the video, if you like the information, if you're a VA borrower in St. Louis and you thought it was helpful, were surprised by anything, I'd love to kind of hear if you didn't decide to use your VA benefits, why did you not use them? Was it because the market was too competitive in 2020 through 2023? Someone told you some bad information, or you're just holding off and waiting for the right time? Either way, I appreciate you sticking around. Thanks for watching the video. And if you have questions outside of that, drop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer questions about the VA loan process or even just buying a house in general.